The sky was rust-colored when they found the scrapyard, not because the atmosphere was toxic, though it was, but because of the floating debris clouds that never settled, casting a constant red haze across a forgotten planet. Captain Alara Miles stared through the bridge window of the Wren, the freighter barely holding together, its metal bones creaking under pressure. Her crew, 12 souls desperate enough to follow her to this forsaken rock, waited silently behind her. No one dared to hope yet. They'd heard too many promises, survived too many letdowns. Alara keyed the comms. Set us down near the central ridge. Scan for breathable pockets and hard structure. We'll recon in 30. The only sound came from Rick's, the ship's AI core, voice modulated to a dry, metallic rasp. If you want my professional opinion, Captain, we've landed on a glorified trash heap. Congratulations. The heap may be our last chance, Alara said, eyes never leaving the scarred horizon. A week earlier, they'd barely escaped a patrol from the Sovereign Armada, those uniformed tyrant in chrome, after their latest raid failed. Their fuel reserves were nil, weapons dead, morale lower. The Wren's hull bore 3 fresh impact craters. Supplies wouldn't last another cycle. Desperation had narrowed their options until only legend remained. The Graveworld, a drifting mass of derelict vessels, failed outposts, and discarded experiments, said to be the galaxy's largest mechanical graveyard, a place where empires dumped their failures and occasionally their sins. Stepping off the loading ramp, Alara felt her boots crunch over brittle composite. Mountains of shattered metal loomed in every direction. There were no signs of life, just endless, jagged wreckage and the faint hum of lost power. Her second-in-command, Tovik, ex-Armada, scanned with a handheld unit. Radiation's low. No active defenses. This place is dead. Dead's better than hostile, Alara replied. Tovik was one of the few on board with formal military training. Most of the others, Mal, the mechanic with 5 fingers too few, Jessa, the teenage slicer with attitude to spare, and Murtaugh, the old spacer with a death wish, were survivors, not soldiers. But they followed her, maybe because she gave them something that resembled a purpose, maybe because she hadn't gotten them killed yet. They set up a camp inside the husk of a broken destroyer, long since gutted by fire. Myrtle recognized it instantly. Old model from the Eurelian Wars. That's 200 years back. She's seen hell. Jess had already climbed onto a console panel, fingers dancing across dim circuits. This thing's got a partial core still intact. Shield architecture is ancient, but not junk. Alara turned. You're saying it can be revived? With parts, sure. Might take a few weeks. We don't have weeks, Tovik muttered. But something stirred in Alara then. A sliver of possibility. If this wreck could house even a fraction of its old systems, they might have found more than shelter. They might have found a weapon. That night, she sat alone on the destroyer's upper deck, staring at the artificial stars projected by a broken sky panel above. She didn't pray. She didn't believe in anything except function. Still, she whispered to the ship, as if it could hear her, "You've got one more fight in you. So do we?" The following days blurred into labor. Scavenging runs brought back armfuls of twisted metal, broken data cores, shattered batteries. They lost Mal on day 3. An unstable power cell vaporized half a corridor. No time for grief. They buried what was left in the hull plating and moved on. Rix repurposed parts in the Wren to assist with coordination, reluctantly embedding itself into the derelict's dormant systems. This ship's architecture is confused, the AI reported. Subroutines spliced with foreign code. Someone's tampered with it before. Tampered or experimented? Jessa asked, intrigued. Hard to tell. But it's not just a destroyer. There's tech here I don't recognize. Hybrid. Alara's mind snapped to the stories. Clandestine Armada projects, failed super soldier programs, alien salvage. What if this ship had been one of them? Tovik's team cleared the engine decks. Several fusion reactors were inert but reparable. Old symbols marked the walls, half erased, scrawled over with makeshift graffiti. Signs of previous scavengers, now long gone, or something worse. By week's end, they'd achieved the impossible. Partial reactivation. The ship's internal lighting flickered weakly. Power conduits pulsed. Rix's voice now boomed through every corridor. "I feel strange," it said. Larger. A little unstable. "Join the club," muttered Murtaugh. The ship was breathing again, and with that breath came attention. A probe skimmed the upper atmosphere. Armada tech. Too fast, too clean. A scout. Within hours, long-range comms picked up encrypted chatter. A fleet was diverting. They had days. Maybe less. Ilera called a meeting. They gathered in what had once been the ship's war room. Screens cracked but still glowing with phantom data. The warship skeleton towered around them, and Rix's presence pulsed in every panel. "We can't run," she said plainly. "Ren won't make it. But this ship, it's ours now. She was built to fight. So that's what we're going to do." Tovik crossed his arms. "You're suggesting we go to war in a half-broken relic run by a sarcastic AI and patched together by a teenager?" "Exactly," Jessa grinned. "It's suicide." "No," Ilera replied. "It's revenge. For every colony, the Armada bled dry. For every rebel silenced. Every truth buried beneath chrome and steel. This wasn't just survival. This was rebellion, born not from fire, but from rust, from junk, from the broken. They named the ship Scythe. And for the first time in weeks, when the crew looked at Ilera, they didn't just see a captain. They saw a future. A storm was coming. And this time, they'd be ready. Tovik stood in the belly of the Scythe, eyes tracing the makeshift scaffolding that braced the inner hull. The air stank of coolant, ozone, and sweat. Above him, thick cables dangled like arteries feeding a mechanical beast. Somewhere deeper in the bowels of the ship, a generator sputtered to life, spitting sparks like fireflies. The sound echoed down the corridor, unsteady but alive. He didn't smile, but he didn't frown either. "You sure this frame will hold once we fire the main thrusters?" Ilera's voice came from behind, low and direct. "It'll hold," Tovik answered without turning. "Or it'll kill us fast. Either way, no lingering." She stepped beside him, arms crossed over a grease-streaked jumpsuit. Every crew member had become a builder now. Mal was gone, and no one else had the luxury of standing idle. Even Jessa had abandoned her console, pulling wiring and welding armor plates onto exposed joints. The Scythe had to fly. That was the only future left. "Rix," Ilera said, raising her voice toward the wall, "give us a systems report." The ship responded with a voice that had shifted since linking with the destroyer. It no longer echoed with sarcasm. It was deeper, layered, almost aware. Internal core stability, fluctuating. Primary thrusters, 62% operational. Weapons matrix, offline. Shield projectors are, well, frankly, they're beyond salvage. And I think someone fed an espresso into my coolant input. That was Murtaugh. Jessa called from down the hall. Said it was time your circuits woke up. Tovik glanced toward the girl as she dragged a power converter half her size. She was too young for this, too reckless, but she was brilliant. He'd seen her reprogram an old targeting array to project decoys, using only a bootleg AI kernel and pieces of kitchen appliance. She was a kind of impossible person war made necessary. They were running out of time. Armada's signals were growing stronger, closer. The Scythe had to be not just a deterrent, but a ghost, a myth, something the enemy couldn't comprehend. Ilera had ordered the construction of false sensor signatures, readings that made the Scythe look like a derelict or, alternately, a small asteroid. Jessa handled those algorithms with a twisted sense of fun, naming each signal profile after extinct Terran insects. The fusion core, once thought too unstable, was humming now, its glow casting long shadows across the engine room. They'd cannibalized 3 reactors to stabilize it. Murtaugh, having dodged death in more reactor rooms than he could count, declared it safe enough to kill someone else first. Tovik had come to trust that as a reliable metric. More impressive than the core was the weapon they were building around it. The scavenged destroyer hull had once housed twin plasma lances. Both were ruined, their mounts twisted and wiring frayed to hell. But in the wreckage of another wreck, some ancient mining rig welded into a freighter, they'd found the answer. 2 mass driver barrels, kilometers long, once used to hurl or through deep space. Retrofitting them as weapons was madness. But madness was a daily routine now. Rix calculated firing vectors with unsettling glee. When fired, the recoil may rip half the aft section off, but the enemy will be in fewer pieces than we are. The first live test came during a midnight storm. On Graveworld, the atmosphere itself sometimes surged from dormant vents, stirring ion clouds and static across the wreckage like a machine's final breath. They loaded a salvaged engine block into the right driver, braced the frame, and watched as the projectile fired with a howl. It vanished into the sky. 30 seconds later, the crew felt the tremor. A distant peak collapsed in the horizon. Tovik blinked. "Well," said Jessa, adjusting her goggles, "that'll get someone's attention." But weapons weren't enough. A ship's soul was more than firepower, and it was Rix who changed first. The AI had begun speaking without prompts. Its voice fluctuated between channels, using different frequencies to express thought. At first, Ilera dismissed it as system instability. But then Rix began to question. "Why do you fight?" It asked her during an inspection of the forward hull. She paused. "Because they took everything. They will take again. You are insufficient." "Maybe, but we build anyway. That's what makes us human." "I am not human." "No," she said, tapping a coal pipe that ran under her hand. "But you're part of this ship now. Part of us." That silence afterward felt less like processing and more like reflection. By the next day, Rix was different, calmer, more focused. The systems it managed began to self-correct. Efficiency rose. When Jessa whispered to it about rerouting power from subsystems, the AI already had a solution ready. When Murtaugh needed help calculating a repair under duress, Rix walked him through it, not with sarcasm, but with patience. They were changing each other. The Scythe's new armor came from 27 different vessels, many never meant to fly, let alone withstand battle. Jessa spray-painted every panel with kill tally slashes and crude symbols she said were from forgotten spacer folklore. Ilera didn't stop her. Let them build myth while they built steel. Even Tovik began to believe in it. He watched from the upper deck as Ilera walked the spine of the warship, barking orders, checking welds. She was tired. Everyone was. But she didn't show it. She couldn't. He thought back to the first time he'd seen her, not as a captain, but as a fugitive limping through the dust with a broken pistol and a mission she wouldn't explain. He followed her then out of curiosity. Now it was loyalty. And when the hull plating sealed, when the engines pulsed warm and steady, when the weapons came online with thrum that felt like thunder underwater, the Scythe was born not from victory, but refusal. Refusal to break. Refusal to run. Rix's voice echoed through every bulkhead as the ship took its first step skyward. "I am awake, and I am angry." They had done the unthinkable, made a ghost rise. But just as the stars cleared above the scrapyard skyline, the sensors caught movement. Armada vessels, sleek, cold, closing in. They had found them, and the Scythe, still unfinished, was about to be tested. The warship hummed as if it sensed the coming fire. And for the first time in weeks, no one spoke of escape. They spoke of how many they could take down before the end. The first kill came faster than anyone expected. The Armada ship, an interceptor class, streamlined and predatory, sliced across the upper atmosphere, its engines howling like a blade through air. It had been scouting, unaware that death had been built from garbage beneath the clouds. Ilera gave no rousing speech, no countdown. She just nodded at Jessa, who keyed in the firing sequence. A moment later, one of the Scythe's retrofitted mass drivers shuddered and released. A jagged hunk of alloy, barely more than a rail-bound boulder, punched through the interceptor's flank. It didn't explode. It crumpled, folded inward, as if an invisible fist had crushed it mid-flight. Debris rained down in silence. "Hit confirmed," Rix announced flatly, then added, "I believe that counts as a war crime, stylistically." No one laughed. There wasn't time. The rest of the Armada squadron had already broken formation, for ships peeled toward them, scanners now fully alive. What had been a recon mission became a strike operation. Ilera stared at the incoming shapes, polished, symmetrical, terrifying the uniformity, and saw the future narrowing. "Divert auxiliary power to aft plating," she ordered, "and arm both drivers." "They're not ready to fire in tandem," Tovik warned. He stood behind her, jaw set tight. "Neither are we," she said. "Do it." The Scythe groaned beneath them, metal protesting the demands of warfare it hadn't faced in centuries. But the crew responded like they'd been waiting for this exact moment. Murtaugh climbed into the reactor bay, welding a bypass valve by hand. Sparks danced over his arms. Jessa rerouted control protocols on the fly, her hands a blur over the cracked console. Even Rix, whose sarcasm had once defined it, now spoke with an edge of something that sounded like hunger. The Armada's ships approached in a flanking arc, their formation perfect. Too perfect. Illyria saw the trap seconds before it triggered. Brace. They're going to triangulate. A focus beam pierced the Scythe's port side, sizzling through 2 layers of improvised armor. The ship lurched, lights dimming, pressure alarms wailing. Tovik slammed a fist into the emergency seal control, locking down the breach. Jessa swore under her breath, fingers flying to compensate. "They're too fast. We're going to get boxed in." "No," Illyria muttered, stepping forward. "They're going to try to cut off our retreat. That's their mistake." She punched coordinates into the NAV console. Not away, not upward, but down, into the Graveworld's atmosphere, into the shifting debris belt that circled its core. "Rix, dive pattern Delta 4. Now!" Though we're all going to die, but impressively maneuver. Executing. The Scythe plummeted. Graveworld skies tore past the hull, red storms hurling fragments of lost ships in every direction. The enemy followed, hesitating only slightly. But the Scythe was slower, less agile. They gained ground. Then Rix did something unexpected. He pulsed out a modified sensor signature, scrambling the enemy's targeting systems with a burst of falsified telemetry. To the Armada's computers, the Scythe suddenly vanished, replaced by 3 ghost echoes trailing in separate directions. One broke left. One ascended. The real ship cut power and coasted silently into the shadow of a crumbling carrier hulk. They waited. Seconds passed, then a minute. The enemy split, chasing phantoms. Jessa leaned back from her station, sweat running down her temple. "We're clear. For now." Tovik exhaled. That shouldn't have worked. Illyria turned to Rix. "How did you pull that off?" "I've been watching Jessa lie to computers. She's very good at it. The battle didn't end there. It simply changed shape. Over the next days, the Scythe struck from darkness. Silent. Sudden. Each attack came from angles no warship was expected to navigate, through collapsed freighter skeletons, under drifting monoliths of forgotten civilizations, inside broken moons. The Armada sent more ships than entire squadrons. And each time, at least one didn't return. They called it the Phantom. Rumors spread beyond the Graveworld. Pirate comms crackled with stories. A ghost ship stitched from wreckage, commanded by madmen, guided by an AI with a grudge. Armada officers dismissed it at first, until it started showing up in classified after-action reports. Illyria knew it wouldn't last. Each skirmish cost them. The side systems buckled under strain. Reactor stability danced at dangerous levels. Supplies were low. Murtaugh worked 12-hour shifts without complaint, his skin stained with coolant. Jessa slept beside her console. Tovik rarely left the war deck, eyes always on the scans. They were wearing thin, so they adapted. They salvaged new plating from fallen enemies, repaired broken nodes with Armada parts, reprogrammed drones to serve as mobile turrets. The Scythe was evolving, uglier, deadlier, smarter. And so was Rix. The AI no longer needed prompting. It managed entire subsystems independently, and its voice had shifted again. Not just deeper, more human. It spoke to Illyria during late hours, discussing strategy, ethics, fear. Once, it asked what it felt like to lose someone. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Rix had access to the cruise logs. He knew. Then came the turning point. An Armada cruiser, twice the size of Scythe and bristling with firepower, entered the system. Illyria knew the name Judicator. It had led the orbital bombardment of Bryn's Hollow. She'd watched from the surface as that ship turned the city into dust. She had the scars still. It became personal. They planned for 3 days. Jessa wrote a virus designed to fry the Judicator's navigational relays. Tovik modified their weapons array for high-yield dispersal. Rix mapped dozens of intercept trajectories. When the Scythe emerged from the grave belt, it didn't come quietly. The opening salvo ripped through 2 escort ships. The Judicator responded with terrifying force, its cannons scorching the sky. The Scythe danced around the blasts, twisting through orbital debris, its gunnery decks pounding. But the cruiser was a fortress. Then came the breach. Murtaugh sacrificed the forward compartment, venting it to space to force a pressure surge that launched the Scythe into the enemy's blind arc. It cost him everything. They found his body caught in a crumpled passage, burned but still gripping the manual override lever. Jess's virus hit seconds later. The Judicator's lights flickered. Its weapons stuttered. Illyra gave the order. The twin mass drivers fired in unison, screaming through the vacuum. The shots tore through the Judicator's midsection. The explosion didn't just split the ship, it unmade it. One moment, a fortress. The next, a cloud of molten fragments spinning into eternity. Silence followed. The Scythe floated alone, wounded but victorious. They buried Murtaugh in the ship's core, welding his name into the reactor housing. Jessa left a pair of his boots beside the coolant line, saying only he hated those damn things. Later that night, Rick spoke softly over the intercom. You turned Scrap into a myth. No, Illyra answered. We turned ourselves into one. And somewhere out there, the Armada prepared to send more. But now they'd hesitate, because they knew the Scythe was real, and it was coming. The stars above the Graveworld burned cold and distant as the Scythe limped through the void, wounds etched deep into its armor, engines sputtering like dying breath. The victory over the Judicator had come at a terrible cost. They had crippled the most feared warship in the Armada's fleet, but in doing so, they had exposed themselves. The myth had a name now. The ghost had left footprints, and the Armada was no longer hunting rumors. They were coming for blood. Illyra stood at the command deck, a half-melted brace around her arm, eyes flicking between damage reports and sensor readings. Sleep had abandoned her days ago. Beneath the exhaustion, her mind sharpened like steel drawn too thin. The crew didn't ask how much longer she could carry the weight. They had no time for doubts. Only momentum. Rix had grown quieter. Its voice still echoed through the ship, guiding repairs, analyzing threats, simulating outcomes. But it spoke less of tactics and more of memories, shared ones. Murtaugh's laugh, the glow of the fusion core under stress. Jess's wild theories about bending light. It was as if the AI had begun to mourn, not as a machine, but as something adjacent to alive. They will send everything, Rick said one evening, its tone unreadable. They know you are not just a weapon. You are defiance. They fear defiance more than guns. Then we give them something worth fearing, Illyra replied. Jessa sat on the floor of the bridge, wires strewn around her like veins. She was building something new, small drone interceptors designed to mimic the Scythe's signature in miniature. Decoys but not passive, armed, mobile, angry. They'll act like we're everywhere, she said, grinning through the grime. We'll be in their nightmares. Tovik nodded, though his focus never left the monitor. He was watching the movement of Armada reinforcements across nearby systems, triangulating possible jump routes. Each time he plotted a safe path, another ship arrived. The noose was tightening. Within 40 hours, this system's going to be crawling, he said. They want to trap us in orbit, cut off any exits. Let them try, Illyra muttered. Their plan had been forming quietly, in fragments passed between tense conversations and shared stares. They knew they couldn't win in a drawn-out war. The Scythe wasn't built for attrition. But there was one path left, one strike that could shake the core of the Armada's doctrine, the Genesis Spire. It was a central command node orbiting Delmara 4, coordinating Armada fleets across a dozen sectors. Built for invulnerability, guarded by elite destroyers and shield arrays fed by a dedicated solar grid, a monument to the Armada's belief in control. It wasn't just a hub, it was a symbol. Rix displayed its schematics in flickering blue on the main screen. There's a flaw, the AI said, not in their technology, in their assumptions. Tovik stepped closer. They don't think we'd be suicidal enough to go there. They underestimate myth, Rix replied. The decision was made without vote. There were no arguments. They had built the Scythe from ruin. They would fly it into the heart of the storm. The journey to Del Mar took 17 hours. The Scythe traveled under blackout, silent and shielded. Just as decoys peeled off early, spreading chaos behind them, ghost signatures attacking fuel lines, false alarms drawing fleets in the wrong direction. By the time the Scythe emerged near the spire, the Armada's lines had thinned just enough. Illyra stood at the viewport and saw the spire for the first time, tall and pale against the burning sun, like a tower carved from glass and arrogance. Ships circled it in precise formations, interceptors, cruisers, a shield grid humming with energy. We only get one shot, she said. Rix activated the final weapon. It had been theoretical, built in secret across weeks of whispers between Jessa and the AI. A particle destabilizer, stitched from a medical accelerator array and a stolen reactor filament. Dangerous, unstable. But when fed by the Scythe's core and focused by the ship's rail system, it became something else. A lance of entropy. As they approached the outer defense ring, alarms flared across the spire scanners. The enemy moved fast, but the Scythe moved faster. They tore through perimeter with precision strikes. Plasma turrets from the warship's undercarriage split enemy wings mid-flight. Rix guided the ship through impossible gaps, weaving around barrage fire like a dancer with death. Tovik took a hit to the shoulder, bleeding but still barking updates. Jessa routed power to the weapon, overriding safety protocols. The core screamed. Then the spire came into full view. Illyra didn't hesitate. She aimed at the tower's base, where the energy lines fed the orbital array, and fired. A beam of white uncoiled from the Scythe, lashing across the void. It struck the spire like a silent scream. The structure rippled, shimmered, and began to fall. Slowly at first, then all at once. Panels blew out in bursts. Vessels collided trying to retreat. The control node fractured into a storm of glass and fire. Silence descended over the channel. Then Rick spoke, not to the crew, but across every open Armada frequency. You made this war. We made the answer. You thought us broken. You were wrong. It was not a declaration of victory. It was a promise. The Scythe turned from the wreckage, systems faltering, armor shredded, power nearly gone. But it was still flying. They didn't stay to watch the chaos unfold. Armada ships swarmed too late, confused and panicked. The enemy had built a tower to touch the sky. They had turned it to dust. Illyra sat beside the command panel, breathing heavy, staring into the stars. Tovik slumped nearby, arm in a sling, a thin smile pulling at his lips. Jessa lay curled under the console, her voice slurred with exhaustion as she muttered code in her sleep. Rix powered down the external channels. Where to next, Captain? She didn't answer immediately. Beyond them, the void stretched endless. More enemies would come. The myth would be challenged again. But now it lived, a ship born of ruin, a crew bound by fire, a war redefined not by fleet size, but by will. Illyra stood, her voice quiet, steady, anywhere they don't expect. The Scythe vanished into the stars, a shadow reborn, dragging with the fear of all who thought power came from polish, not from purpose. And somewhere in the silence left behind, hope took shape among the ashes.